You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. We always appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's guest, reminder, our website is live, hazardground.com. Go back and check out previous podcast episodes, get more pictures, bios on our guests, and a lot of great information about what we have coming up next. Also, don't forget to write us a rating and review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Play, also on Spotify, all the places you can get the Hazard Ground. We really appreciate the ratings and reviews. Certainly help us get the word out there about the podcast and help us continue to get you guys some great guests each and every week. This week's guest is a retired Sergeant First Class. He's also a Green Beret, 3 deployments overseas, and some incredible stories to tell, including one that only allows him to be here today because his fellow comrades helped save his life. He is Joe Serna on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Joe, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Well, listen, you have an incredible career, an incredible story to tell, but let's start from the very beginning and how you got into the military. Why'd you sign up?
So, yeah, it was one of those things when in 1995, as I was really walking by a recruiter, and at the time I had a little baby and wasn't sure what to do with the rest of my life, but I knew that I wanted to do something. And walking by the recruiter, I just wanted to serve, serve my country. And so I decided to go in there and enlist, and not really thinking about what's really going on or how the military was going to, treat my family all right. I just went in and went ahead in and signed up for the military.
So you really had no idea what you were getting into at that point in time, though?
No, not at all.
Not
one.
No other family members in the service or anything like that?
No, this is actually because we're from California, and we grew up in an era where my grandparents and my fathers, everybody was during the movement. So when I came in, it was kind of a big shock to everybody that I was joining the military. No, they absolutely love me now, but the time I was joining, they were like, "What are you doing?" So yeah, I came in and there was nobody that I knew that was in the military.
So what were your expectations going in then?
I wasn't really sure what to expect at the time. I didn't know what the military service was about. It was kind of a culture shock for me when I first entered basic training. And while going through basic training, I started learning, kind of indoctrinated into the military culture. And that's where I really learned what the military was about.
Did you fall in love with it early on?
I fell in love with, it's kind of funny, I fell in love with Rambo in 1983. and this is my father took me to, when I was 8 years old. So my father took me to see this movie, and it turned out to be Rambo, and that's what I aspired to be growing up. But no, going into the military, I had no idea. But once I got involved with the military and I found out that, hey, Rambo was a Green Beret, let's do that. So, that's what inspired me.
So Rambo was a Green Beret. As I mentioned, you were a Green Beret. That was the sole purpose of, like, when you signed up, did you say, hey, I want to be a Green Beret, or was that something that came later on in your career?
No, I've always had that in the back of my mind. But I signed up as an artilleryman. I did a couple of years, and I was like, it's time for me to, I wanted to get out, but I wanted to get out with some skill. And then at one point in my career, I had a recruiter come in, a special forces recruiter come in, and they gave us some information on special forces, and that kind of brought everything up again. That's why the reason that's why I wanted to go. That's why I wanted to stay in now, because it was the Green Beret. It was because that guy was, he sold it to me.
Was that recruiter before or after 9/11 when he met you?
Oh, so this is a pretty cool story. So, it was before 9/11 that I got recruited. I dropped my packet to go to Special Forces selection. During this time, from me signing my packet to the time I was going to report to training, 9/11 happened. So 9/11 happened. Right after that, I went to selection October. So I was right in selection in SF right after 9/11.
What were the discussions like when you got to selection? Like, what 9/11 just happened? Was everybody there a little bit more focused, a little bit more amped up for the whole thing? I mean, what were people saying?
No, it was definitely the instructors were definitely keyed in, and the atmosphere was really more tense. I think it was tensed. That was most of our small group discussions were about the events that were happening on the outside, that we were kind of really cut off. The information we were cut off because, in selection, we don't get any information. We don't get any news. So it's one of those things where our instructors come in and they're telling us and they're feeding us information. And I can tell in their voice that, we were really keyed up. Our guys were keyed up. Our instructors were keyed up, and they really, really felt that what they were doing is training the young soldiers or young Green Berets to go out there and fight a war.
Were there any thoughts in your mind that, you drop your packet for selection and everything else, and then 9/11 happens, that, you've got a family, you've got kids at home and everything. Did you ever think that maybe I don't want to do this because I know danger is ahead?
Initially, no. It was, I thought about the Green Berets as an elite unit, and it still holds true today. But I thought as a Green Beret that our Super Bowl, compared to like an NFL team, they have to go on the road and they have to play games and they have to go away, and then they go to the Super Bowl, and that's why they play the game. For me, I kind of compared it kind of the same way. Like, I was a Green Beret, I had to go to this training, and my ultimate goal was to go to combat and to serve my country. And so that's where I kind of, I did not have the, this sense of like, my family. I didn't have that. I just knew that I wanted to fight for my country.
Okay, so how quickly after you finish selection and you get your tab and you get your Green Beret, do you end up in combat?
So, okay, I finished up the Q course around 2002, and I got assigned to 7th Special Forces Group. I was assigned to ODA 784, which is a Halo team. At the time, the 7th Group was gearing up to deploy, and 5th and 3rd already had done their operations and deployments to Afghanistan. And so I did about 3 years in garrison. We're training up. And in 2005, I deployed to Afghanistan.
For your first of 3 deployments?
Yes.
What was your mission in that first deployment? What were you told? What were your expectations going in? I mean, obviously, you're looking for bad guys, but what were kind of some of the circumstances?
So our operational area was to, we were in the, I was at Firebase Ripley, which is Tarankout, the Ruzgan province. And we had a pretty large area. And we had one ODA in that area to affect, the surrounding villages. So our mission was to go out there and provide a variety of missions, because Special Forces has 7 core missions, and we were tasked, to do 5 or 6 of those missions at this time. From special reconnaissance to combat patrols to direct action. So we had a variety of missions going on at this time.
And for the folks listening who aren't military, when Joe says ODA, that just stands for Operational Detachment Alpha, and that is a group of 8 to 10, 12, Green Berets who all have specific assignments. The Special Forces operate. Their basic philosophy is less is more. They can do more with less guys who are highly qualified. So it's a small elite group of fighters who handle a variety of tasks, some of the stuff that Joe just talked about. But in that environment, how quickly did you actually see combat?
So I was in combat. Well, I was in theater for about a month in January. I got at the end of December, and I was there for January. So I got there at the end of 2005, and we started operating as a team around mid-January. And so about a month into our deployment, which probably put us around February, one of our sister ODAs had hit an IED which the whole vehicle, everyone died from that IED. So that was our first casualty as a company. 2 weeks later, my ODA was doing a combat reconnaissance patrol in the city Mirabad, and we hit our first IED, and that was my first combat experience. Was an IED.
Wow. Tell me the circumstances. You're just doing a reconnaissance. You're obviously in a vehicle driving around. What were you looking for?
So we were just out there. We were out going to village to just to get to know the area, the feel of our area, and we came across a small road, and it looked normal to a normal person. Our first two vehicles went through it, this narrow pass, and then I was in the third vehicle, which we had a total of four personnel, including myself, and so we entered this little narrow area, and that's when I was jarred from the truck, and I remember distinctly pushing myself off the dirt, looking back at this big gray plume of smoke, which was now my truck, because my truck hit the ID, and we took some casualties.
So when you get up and you look around, you see that. What's your first thoughts in your head?
I thought I was, it was pretty tough to process. It was, I did not. My head was. I was still kind of like. I guess you would consider it like getting hit by a boxer, and you got that fogginess of war, fogginess of the fight, and all that was going on in my head, and it did not register that I just got blown out of a truck until I heard the first round snap over my head. So I heard an AK round hit by my head.
Wow.
And so that's when it kind of cleared my head, and then that's when I looked around for my friends, and I knew that we were in trouble.
Did everybody in the vehicle survive the blast of the IED?
No.
Okay, so there were casualties at that point in time, but because you just mentioned you're taking small arms fire on top of it from AK-47s.
No, the IED it took out some of my friends.
And were you able to figure that out at the time, or did you have to? I mean, obviously, if you're getting, again, small arms fire, the first thing you have to do is get some cover and make sure you're not going to get shot by bullets.
No, absolutely. So I kind of woke up on the ground, and then I kind of looked at my body, checked my body out after I heard the snaps, and realized that I didn't have any guns on me to protect myself. So I ran about 20 feet. I got blown out about 20 feet from the truck. So I ran back to the truck, and I realized the whole truck was empty. There was nobody in the truck. So that tells me everybody was blown out of the truck as well. And so I jump up and get the truck. I get in the truck and grab my M4, and then that's when I started returning fire. We had the fire kind of suppressed, and there was a lull in fire, and that's when I jumped out of the back of the truck, and I started doing a head count of the guys in my vehicle.
And what did you ascertain once you started doing that?
I went to. It was pretty tough. I went to I seen my partners, and when I got to them, they were doing okay. They were in a bad way, but they were alive. That was two of the guys that were in the truck. The third guy, I had to look for him, and it took me a little while to find him. And when I got to him, things weren't that good.
How do you reconcile the fact that, this IED blast throws four guys from a truck and you're the only one uninjured? Have you had trouble thinking about that?
Yeah, I always do. I do. Yeah, that is true. I think about it. And it took me a long time to get over this event. And the question I used to ask myself is, why was I not in the same situation as far as the injuries? But I was kind of, at the same time, I was kind of blessed that I wasn't, because I did have a chance to protect our guys during this firefight. So yeah, it is a tough thing, and I did ask myself for a while, and then, I kind of had to come to the conclusions that things are just the way they are.
How'd you ultimately get out of there?
So, so we started receiving fire again from the same location, and it was getting pretty intense. And I grabbed one of our Afghan counterparts, which is part of the Afghan National Army. I grabbed one of our soldiers, and we went towards the house that we were receiving fire from. And once we got there, we went into the house, and we secured the guys, and these are the same guys that detonated the IED, because we seen them running away from the site. That's and once we apprehended those guys, we took them back in, and then we left.
Well, how'd you get? I mean, did you drop on the other vehicle in the convoy, or was your vehicle destroyed at that point in time?
Yeah, my vehicle was totally destroyed. So what had happened was we had called the Australians in, their demo team in, to come and take care of our truck, because we still had a lot of sensitive equipment on that truck.
Right.
So when they came in, we told them, like, here's the truck. This is we're going to blow it in place. We don't want to take it because there's nothing we can recover, but we don't want it turning into the other hands. And so their engineer came down, and he put about 64 blocks of C4 on the engine block. And so I was like, I went with him to do this, and I said, I looked at him, my Australian counterpart. I'm like, hey, let me fire this up. And he's like, go ahead. So I ignited, I set the fuses up, and I pulled pins, and we took off running.
Fire in the hole, right?
Fire in the hole. It was a big. It was pretty high. It was a pretty big blast.
There you go. So on the rest of that deployment, you've already lost some guys. How does that go? I mean, obviously your team is mentally and emotionally down and upset, but the mission continues.
Absolutely. And my team did an excellent job throughout the remainder of that mission. We did our job, and we did it with honor. We did it with pride. We lost a couple guys later on, but I would say that since it was early on in a rotation where we've never experienced combat, and we knew we had 7 months to go after we experienced this accident, I think we all deep inside knew that it was going to be a long rotation, and there was a little fear in all of us. Because if this is the first month or second month, and we have casualties, the next 7 months is going to be pretty hard. So, but we came together as a team. We supported each other, and we got through it.
When you look back at that deployment and all the losses that you took, was there ever a moment that you looked at the decision you made to enlist in the Army or become a Green Beret? Did you ever start to second guess that?
Well, not that I was a Green Beret. It's that more of that I left my family behind. It was one of those things where I didn't question my decision to join the Green Berets, because it was really an honorable thing. It was, did I make the decision to leave my family and deploy to combat when I knew that that's where I wanted to be? It's kind of felt more guilty for the decisions I made to leave my family.
Was that because the possibility of being killed became so real?
Absolutely.
Did you ever talk to your family about that while you were away?
No, we kind of kept that conversation suppressed. And when I talked to my loved ones back home when I was deployed to Afghanistan, I didn't really say much to them. I didn't want them to worry. And I really, when I came back, because our deployment cycle was so quick and the turnover rate was so fast that we didn't have time to really heal like that. So, no, that was never shared.
It must be really tough. I mean, when you're operating at such a quick tempo and a quick pace, suppressing all those emotions, you know they're coming back up at some point in time, right?
Yeah, they definitely they've I've had my share, and I've had my shares, and not really necessarily towards the rotations, because I was so busy or so active in these deployments that I didn't have time to process, my last deployment. So when I finally, I finally had the opportunity to address these issues, yeah, they all popped up at once. It was really overwhelming.
When do you actually leave your first deployment?
So I ended up leaving my first deployment in August of 2006.
Okay. And then what's next?
So I had a deployment in January of 2007. And from 2007 to February of 2007 to about September of 2007, it was a pretty normal deployment in Afghanistan. Then I returned home, and we trained up again, and we went back in May of 2008.
Well, before you go any further, I want to ask you about what a normal deployment to Afghanistan consists of.
A normal deployment is where, I guess a normal deployment is where we don't have too many casualties.
Right.
We don't have a lot of, we don't take a lot of injuries or Ks or WAs, and it's not really normal. It's just that it's not like the other deployments.
There's usually one guy on the team who has this air of invincibility around him. When you guys are the best of the best, there's always one guy who still shines a little bit brighter above anybody else. Was there anybody on any of your first two deployments that kind of had that, and that guy got injured or that guy got killed, and it kind of just was like, wow, I mean, if he can go down, anybody can go down?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was me.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, I have a few injuries, and it was one of those things where you're invincible and you become invincible, and you think you become invincible, and until reality sets in. But yeah, it's one of those things where you carry a chip on your shoulder now because you did get injured once.
What injuries did you sustain on either of your first two deployments, if any?
The first deployments, I got once I got blown out of the truck, I got some shrapnel. I got concussion, and I was pretty lucky. I walked away from that, healthy.
And what about the second deployment? Everything also healthy?
The second deployment, everything was fine.
So let's move on to your third deployment. I know we're going kind of quick here, but the third deployment was one where you had literally a life-changing, life-saving event. When do you arrive back in Afghanistan for the third time?
So the third time, I showed up to Afghanistan with my team, and this time I was on First Battalion. First Battalion, 7th Group, and I was on 7113. That was my ODA. And we were deployed to Afghanistan in May of 2008. And the first month was fine. It was all train up. And in June, we had a pretty significant accident.
Okay, so tell me, what was that significant accident? That morning you woke up, what were you thinking, what were you feeling, and what did you know about the mission for the day?
So yeah, that day we were tasked to go train our counterparts. We had the Afghani Army again, so we were going to just do normal training. It was a hot summer day. We spent all day on the range with this company, and we received information that our sister ODA, one of the team members of our sister ODA, had stepped on a landmine, and he was killed, and so that ODA was bringing him back to my fire base, because that's where we flew him out to take him home. And so in the process of bringing him back to my fire base, that ODA got stuck in the fields. So they were bogged down. They couldn't move in their trucks. So
now, bogged down because they were taking enemy fire, or because the lay of the land had them stuck?
it was lay of the land.
Okay.
It was lay of the land. It was just, we had these heavy trucks. We were going across the field, and they bottomed out.
Gotcha.
So that evening, they said, "Hey, let's spin these guys up," which is my brigade, and we'll take a wrecker out there, which is a tow truck, and let's go pull these guys out. And while we're pulling these guys out, let's pick up my friend and bring him back. And so everybody was on board with that. We were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we went off and we started traveling down a dirt road to find our boys.
And this is at nighttime now?
Yeah, it's about now. This is about 2 a.m. now.
Okay.
So there was 3 ODAs, which is I'm sorry, 3 ODAs. There was 3 trucks, 1 ODA, and then we had a tow truck in the middle of our convoy. So we were kind of pulling security for it.
So the guys who were bogged down and stuck out there in the vehicles, how long were they out there for?
Oh, they were out there for about 12 hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were out there for a while.
And nobody tried to go get them prior to that, or they thought they were going to be able to get out on their own? I mean, just out of curiosity, why were they allowed to sit there for that long?
So what they try to do is self-recover, but the equipment that on the vehicles they had to self-recover, the vehicle was way too much, and the equipment wouldn't pull them out. And so after we were done training, and at this point, it wasn't like it was an emergency.
Okay, so they weren't in a dangerous area?
They weren't in a dangerous area, but, it was not like they were under fire. We still had control of the area. It was just they were stuck.
Got it.
So, yeah, we were tasked to go out there and recover the vehicle and also bring my buddy back. And on the way out there, we got stuck ourselves. And we were in this big old field, and it was big agriculture. I'm not sure what was going on at the time, but it was really muddy. So we decided that we can't go through the field. We'll go back to the road and try going a different route so we can get out of this mud. So we don't want to get stuck. And during that process, we drove back to a dirt road that was next to a creek. And this creek ran up and through the middle of the major road. So we decided to follow this creek on this dirt road to the main road. And during that process, or during that travel, we got in trouble ourselves.
How so?
So when we were heading back to the road, there was 4 guys in my vehicle, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were driving without any lights. We were driving under nods, and we were the last vehicle of this convoy, and so the road was really dusty and on the nods, and the ground started shaking underneath the truck. At some point, the ground gave away, and the truck leaned in towards the creek, and it was one of those things where the truck is so heavy, it's top heavy, and all the equipment on the truck, it caused it to roll into the river. And eventually, the truck went upside down into the river. And we were there, and we were trying to get out, and we were stuck in the truck, and I was stuck on the water. I was trapped in the water on my seatbelt because all the ammo cans and everything had fell on top of me, and I couldn't get to my seatbelt. I didn't know if it was my gun that I was pulling. I didn't know if it was my seatbelt. I couldn't take it off. And finally, I went underwater with the seatbelt on. And my friend, one of my good teammates, one of my really good teammates, he jumped to me. It was we can't now. Mind you, that it's pitch black, so I don't know how he got to me. but he had the sense to come to me and lift me out of the water. And he attached my seatbelt and lifted me out of the water, and then we started fighting for the doors. And that's when it got pretty bad.
When you were stuck in the seatbelt and you were upside down and underwater, what kind of thoughts are going through your mind?
I never wanted to drown. I never wanted to drown. I'm in a pretty bad situation right now. I've always thought I had the strength to say, I'm going to get myself out of this kind of position. And then it just went to kind of like survival mode, to like, okay, this is it. And it was extremely uncomfortable.
So when you feel that your seatbelt gets released, what are you thinking? Like, what happened?
Okay, so when I'm underwater at this point, and then I feel a hand come down, I feel my seatbelt gets released, and then my partner grabs me, we stand up. And as soon as I stand up, the entire truck flips into the water. So now we're standing kind of reverse. Our heads are on the floorboards now.
Right.
And the water starts rising, and we can feel the water rising in the truck. We don't know how deep the water. We don't know how deep we're in. We don't know how deep this creek is. We just know the water's rising, and this truck is all done off hydraulics. So everything is done. Everything needs a battery. Even the doors, to open the doors up, it all needs hydraulics. But once we hit the water, we lose all the hydraulics. So now we're just fighting for door handles. We're trying to fight for hope, really. And the water rises, and it continues to rise, and it doesn't stop rising. And we start talking to each other like, okay, we try to make light of the situation. When we started knowing it was getting really bad, and so we started talking about our family and getting our minds out of there. Because we were in a bad situation.
I mean, what you're painting is something like everybody's seen in a movie, like where the water's rising and there's no way out or you can't find the way out. How tense is that moment as that water continues to rise and you look and feel like you're out of options?
That's the ugliest feeling that I've ever experienced. I can't compare that to any other experience. That is it is something to where you love life so much. Like I love life so much, but I didn't want to suffer. So you think about other options, to get away from that suffering. But you love life so much, you don't want to go those routes. And these are the things that are going through my head right now. These are things that the water's coming up. I can't get out of here. I know that it's going to get bad if the water continues to rise. And at some point, it got up to our neck, and my forehead was pressed against the floorboard just to breathe.
So I'm sorry to cut you off, but you had already made contact with one other person in the vehicle. Did you know where the other two guys were? Have you heard them at all? Were they screaming? Were they talking?
No, it was totally silent. I had no clue if my teammates got out, if they were still in the truck. I was hoping they got out. And so there was four of us, and at that point, I just knew it was just myself and my partner in the back of the truck.
So what's he saying to you?
Well, he's asking me if we're going to be okay. And I said, yeah, we're going to be okay. There's nothing wrong with us right now. We're going to be fine. And, we really can't really do anything. We have no choice but to make light of, what the situation we're in. So he was asking, "Are we going to be okay?" I said, "Yeah, you're going to be okay." And then I heard a popping sound, and that's when I knew that my truck, the truck that we were in, had rolled over the fuel cans that were on the side of the truck. So now the gas and the diesel, all the fumes were coming up out of the underwater, and it was polluting our air.
Oh God!
So the air I had now started feeling diesel fumes. And
which in a small confined space can make you pass out pretty quickly.
I was out quick. Yes, I was. So yeah, I was out quick, and as far as that moment right there, that's as far as I'm going to get into it.
But is that all you remember? Just the smell of the fumes and everything, and then it goes black for you, and you pass out?
Yeah, I'd rather not get into that part. It was a tough situation at that time.
So when you wake up or you come to, what are you seeing? What's around you?
So the rest of my team, they finally find our vehicle in the water, and they hook a tow truck up to it, and they find our vehicle, and then they finally hook the tow truck up to it, the wrecker, and they pull our truck sideways, and they pull our truck out of the water, off the creek bed, and the water drains almost instantly. That's what it felt like. The diesel was so thick, the fumes and the smell was so thick, I was still hallucinating off it. And I had a gun port at the back of the truck, on the back of the window, that I had opened previously to the rollover. And all I know is my friend had reached, he was on the outside, he had reached in, grabbed my equipment and pulled me to this gun port and said, "Breathe." And I took a big breath, and it was, fresh air, and it cleared my mind that quick.
Wow.
And they said, "Open the hatch up." The hatch was now on the side. The vehicle was on the side, and the hatch was on the side. So I opened the hatch up, and that's when they pulled us out.
So I know you don't want to get into it, but I mean, the guy who was with you obviously saved your life.
Yeah. Well, all three members died. So I was the sole survivor on that trip.
So this is the second time now where you've been in a vehicle with three other guys and you walked away.
Yes. That's.
Feel lucky or feel remorse that, what's can you feel lucky at that point in time?
I felt blessed that I was able to make it from both of those incidents. I really did. I really felt blessed that I was able to walk away from the situation, but it did take a toll on me, and I did feel remorse for my comrades and their families and their loved ones, and it was tough. Both of these missions were tough, and I felt blessed.
I'm sorry. I just have one more question because I want to explore the blessed feelings. I do, honestly. But
sure.
When you got the information after the fact on what had happened, when all the dots got connected and all the holes got filled in, what were you thinking and feeling about the entire incident?
So I had a pretty good team. They knew the situation, how bad it was on the ground. They knew the situation I was in. So they made sure that they put me on my own helicopter. So I didn't see the rest of the events, and they flew me back to a fire base, and they put me off the helicopter. They run me into the ER room. And they throw me on the bed on the ER table, and they stand around looking at me because there was nothing physically. I was just in awe, and they were just looking at me. All these doctors were looking at me, and my commander and command sergeant major, they walk in, and I'm on the table, and I'm in disbelief. I'm kind of shocked. I'm like, I still don't really know what's going on. I can't process that much information. And they tell me, hey, the other 3 guys have passed.
Okay, so that's what I was just going to ask. When do you find out? Okay.
Yeah, when I was on the ER table, I found out that 3 of my friends had died.
And what was the feeling you had when you heard that information?
I felt sick. I felt like not again. One of those things like not again, and why me?
Right.
And I felt really bad. I felt horrible. It was just a mix of emotions that had hit me all at once. And I know for sure I didn't want to go home.
You talked about being blessed before, and I would imagine it's hard to feel that blessing after you get that news that 3 of your comrades are gone, and that remorse and that feeling you have about the sadness of losing your friends probably blocks a lot of the feelings of blessing that you talk about now, no?
No, absolutely. Now, when I talk about blessing now, it's because I have time to process. During this time, it wasn't blessing. It was more of anger. It was more of anger and, I guess, retribution or revenge you wanted to get for your friends. But you kind of suppressed all of these feelings because you can't fight. You can't operate in this kind of environment with those feelings.
Right.
So you have to turn them off. So that's kind of if we stay in. That's kind of what I did, because after this incident, they told me, hey, you're going to go home. And mind you, my wife at this time was 6 months pregnant with a boy, with our son, and she got the information that I was coming home, and this was the toughest thing that I had to do. Now when I look back, I mean, I feel horrible about the decision I made, or the decision I made, but I picked up the phone and I said, no, I'm not coming home.
Oh.
And eventually I got injured again, and I did come home. And but as far my wife, and she had the baby and everything was healthy, and my son, we named him after my teammate that saved me.
So when you get home, how do you start your life again?
Okay, so before I get home, we do these other operations, and I'm in this, and we're out in this isolated area. We're in the middle of nowhere, and it's just the ODA. It's just the team, and we're with our counterparts, and we're just cleaning this area. We're going out and we're cleaning the area, but we're on the ground. We have no vehicles. All we have is the guns that we brought in and our supplies. And we're out there doing this like 7-day operation, and I think we were on day 3. And then I was responsible for interviewing the guys that we were arresting. And during one of these interviews, I didn't know that we had our counterparts searching the guys that were coming in that I was talking to, and unfortunately one slipped by with a grenade, and so that's how I got home. I went through that route. I was injured that way.
So what? He detonated a grenade right next to you?
So yeah, we were in a small room, and he was on his knees, and I was looking down at him, and I was talking to him, and I heard a metallic click, like when you pull a pin from a grenade. It makes this
distinct sound.
It makes a metallic click, and I look down and I see, and it's about 2 feet away from me, and I see the grenade rolling from behind him, and so I kick him, and I try to kick him on top of the grenade. But his legs were crossed. We had his legs crossed behind him. When I kicked him, he rolled to the right, and the grenade was to the left. And so my leg, when I was kicking him, I was underneath the grenade when it went off.
Oh.
And so, yeah, I mean, it got me pretty good.
I would say the least. Every cup check, everything intact?
Oh, yes, that's definitely right. Yeah.
It's the first question.
Yeah, everything. Oh, that's the first question I asked. And, yeah, I mean, it was, I couldn't feel my legs, but, I can get up and I can move. I seen when the door opened up, when the door opened up after I was on the ground, I got up and I started watching the door and I collapsed because I couldn't feel my left leg. So then I hopped the rest of the way to get out of the room, and I got outside, and that's when I collapsed. And I did at this time I did a whole body check and to make sure everything was intact, and I was good to go.
Yeah, leg might not be so hot, but as long as the man parts are okay,
yeah.
life can continue. I tell you, it's funny.
Absolutely.
We joke about it a lot on the podcast because it's like the one revelation I've learned since doing this whole thing. It literally is the number one question everybody asks who gets blown up. It's just the first thing every guy wants to know.
Well, I was going to say that. I was going to say that's the first thing I asked for because I was telling my team, I'm like, hey,
my ball's okay.
Hey,
yeah.
Yes, it was okay, and they took my team. They started laughing at me, like, all right, you're still there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So okay, so this sends you home, and you have to figure out a way to get back to a normal life or a new definition of normal life. How does that happen?
Sure, that's a long process there. That's about 5 years of surgery, and a lot of counseling. And yeah, it has its peaks, and it definitely has its peaks. And it's a tough process.
Now,
and,
you had also battled drinking and depression while you were going through all this, correct?
Yeah, definitely. There is no secret about that. I did enter a treatment program, a veterans treatment program that is a program that's only offered to veterans, and it's in the justice system, and to get the help that I needed because I was in a bad way. Yeah, I was battling some demons. Well,
you also spent the night in jail.
Yeah, I did.
How much of a wake-up call was that? So
yeah, one day the judge sentenced me. He did sentence me to a night in jail for something I did, and when I went to report to jail, the judge was sitting there waiting for me at the detention facility.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm like, Judge, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, we're gonna spend the night together.
What?
I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, are you gonna spend the night where? He's like, no, we're gonna be in a cell together. And I'm like, Judge, so you gonna lock yourself up? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna sign my order right now. And I said, there's only one bed in here. And he's like, well, I got the ground. I'm like, Judge, what? I said, Judge Oliver, like, no, you take the. I said, you take the board, I take the ground. And he threw his mat on the ground and sat down.
And what was that? What was that like for you? I mean, that must have been inspiring.
It was inspiring. I mean, they locked the door and everything. I mean, they put us in a cell, and we sat there for about 12 hours. And most of the time we chatted. We talked.
About what?
We talked more about life experiences and our families.
How much did that help you?
Well, that helped me tremendously. It was one of those things where it was the first time I was isolated and I couldn't get out of something physically, where I felt it took me back to Afghanistan, where I was in a truck, and just that isolated feeling, and just having somebody in there telling me it's gonna be all right, it made a world of difference.
And so how much is it all right now after all this?
Now, I manage it now. I can manage it now. It's I have time to process it and to really reflect back and look at things in a different perspective.
Some of those blessings you talked about earlier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for my teammates, I can't. It was a wake up call because I can't live my life that way in their honor and for their sacrifice. So it really was a wake up moment for me.
When you think back on your experience, all of it, surviving the 2 crashes and everything else, and the 2 explosions, I should say, and given where you are now, what's like the one takeaway you have when you look back on it?
To appreciate what we have, to enjoy life, to enjoy the now, and don't take and I don't take for granted the days, and I really enjoy my kids now, and I have a really deep appreciation for my family and life. It's life in general, and to be happy. Because you don't know how short it's going to be. You don't know when it's going to end. You don't know when you don't know when that light switch is going to turn off. That's how fast it was to me. And so now I have a deep appreciation for that, for living life well and enjoying it.
I know this probably is a tougher question to answer than anything, but how often do you think about your brothers that you lost?
So yeah, that's I do think about them often. I do think about the days, the months, and do think about the days that we lost them as an anniversary. I really do feel, I really do feel for the families on those days. But it's something that's never going to go away. I think about them every day.
I mean, one of them in particular saved your life. So what is that like? How is living with that?
Honorable. I think the only thing that the most honorable way to thank the man that saved my life was to name my son in his name. And when I see my son and his smile and his joy and his exuberance and his love and compassion, it makes me happy that we named him after a great American.
I want to shake your hand. It's hard for me to process all of it. I can't imagine what it's like for you on a daily basis. But you talk about being blessed and everything and living for the guys who can't be with us anymore. And I would imagine that gets a little bit easier every day. Not that we would forget them, but, getting back to some semblance of normal is probably easier now than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever, correct?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just like everything else, we heal. And just like everything else, you heal and you have to move on. You move on, and you still remember the guys, but in order to live life and enjoy life, you have to heal, and you have to accept it, and then you have to move on, and you have to live happy, and you have to enjoy your life, and I mean, it's from the time that it happened to the time now. Yeah, it's just I've grown as a spiritual person. I've grown and to enjoy life. And I had to do that. There's no other way. It's one of those things where either you're gonna control it or it's gonna control you.
Any regrets, Joe?
I do have one regret, and that's and it's more of like when I was overseas and I was calling back to the wife saying I wasn't going to be home. I was going to stay in country and fight. My regret is just how she felt at that time.
Right.
And and I never really took that into consideration. That's kind of the only regret I have about doing the things that I did. But no, overall, no, I would do it again.
Well, I know your wife is through the roof right now about having you home every day and being with your kids. And, you used the word blessed, and we talked about it a lot, and I truly believe you are. But I know that there is a price that comes with that blessing for you internally. So I tip my cap to you, and I hold you nothing but the highest regard for the sacrifices you've made along with your brothers and the people that you serve with. But listen, man, it's just an incredible story. I'm so happy you're still with us, and I'm blessed to have had you on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for letting me share it.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.